Hey guys, today I'm going to answer what is a nurse practitioner. So I have found that in many of my clinical sites, people will ask me what a nurse practitioner is and they don't really understand like the concept of it. So because I am a nurse, I almost feel like everybody knows what a nurse practitioner is, but really when I step back and think about it, the nurse practitioner role is relatively new, at least in the timeline of medicine. And so that's what I'm going to be answering today is what the heck is even a nurse practitioner? So a nurse practitioner is a registered nurse with an advanced practice degree. So that means that they are able to diagnose illnesses and create treatment plans like prescribing medication and referring to other providers and things like that. It is not a doctor. It's almost like a doctor, but obviously with a nursing approach. So in my opinion, the difference I've seen between medical doctors and nurse practitioners and their practice is that nurse practitioners has a big holistic approach to the patient, meaning that we focus on not only the illness's effects on the physical body, but also the emotional and social aspect of it. And there's also a major emphasis on education and making sure that the patient understands their disease process, and learning how to care for it themselves when they're at home. So how do you become a nurse practitioner? The very first thing that you need to do is to get your nursing degree, and it has to be a bachelor's degree. You can start off with an associate's degree, but to progress, then you need your bachelor's degree. You also need to be licensed as a registered nurse, so that means you need to pass your NCLEX. The second step is that you need to gain some experience as a nurse. Most nurse practitioners work as a nurse before going on to get their nurse practitioner degree, and that is because the nurse practitioner degree really builds off of your clinical experience as a nurse. So obviously you can't learn everything through an online program. So a large part of it is bringing in your clinical experience as a nurse. This topic I think might be a little bit debated and have different opinions on in the nursing world. I know some nurse practitioners that actually got into nurse practitioner school before they even graduated with their bachelor's degree and before they had ever worked as a nurse. In my opinion, I do think that it's beneficial to have at least some sort of experience before returning for your master's degree. I personally worked as a nurse for about 4.5 years before I decided to apply to the program. By the time I graduate the program and hopefully get a job, I will have been a nurse for 7 years. And I am still currently working full-time as a nurse, and a lot of nurse practitioners work full-time as a nurse while they're getting their advanced degree. So step 3 is earning the graduate degree. So like I said before, you need at the very minimum a master's degree, which is what I am getting, but you can also get your doctorate degree. The master's degree is an MSN. It's a Master's of Science in Nursing, and a doctorate degree is a DNP, a Doctorate of Nursing Practice. So when deciding which one to get, you kind of really just need to look at the pros and cons of both programs. The DNP is the highest education that you can get as a nurse. So, you might want to just knock it all out at once and have it done. And then also, I think you need to look at what job you want as a nurse and then determine what degree is most beneficial for that role. So if you wanted to, be a professor, I think they usually like to have doctorate degrees for that. And then the fourth step after you get your degree is you also need to be licensed. So that is one thing about medicine is obviously we all need to be competent in what we're doing, and to get there a lot of the times it is a national test that you are taking. So for nurse practitioners, the two common ones that I've heard is the AANC and the AANP. And even though that is a national test, you still need to be licensed through your state. So that is another thing to keep in mind. It is not an additional test, but that is the licensure part of it, is through your state. And then the last step is to get a job as a nurse practitioner. So depending on where you live, getting a job as a nurse practitioner could be either really easy or more challenging. So I would consider looking into your state, seeing what types of jobs there are as a nurse practitioner and how high the demand is. And you might even need to consider relocating as an option, because I know there's obviously going to be like rural states and rural cities that probably have a higher need for nurse practitioners, especially primary care providers. So what do nurse practitioners do? After you've gotten your experience as a nurse, you've gone to graduate school, you got licensed, you got a job, it's like, what are we doing now? So for nurse practitioners, it's a lot like nursing, which is really you can work anywhere and in any specialty that is hiring nurse practitioners. So I have friends that work in the hospital setting, I have friends that work in the outpatient setting, friends that work in urgent cares, I have friends that have started their own businesses. You literally can go anywhere, and in my experience, almost almost every specialty has nurse practitioners, so you can truly specialize like to your heart's desire, which in my opinion is one of the greatest perks of the nursing field. As a nurse and as a nurse practitioner, your job opportunity and the specialties that you decide to go into are truly endless, and you can always pivot if you decide something's not for you. One thing to note is that your scope of practice as a nurse practitioner varies completely on your state laws. So like I said, you pass a national exam, but you then need to be licensed through your state, and the state is going to determine what you are actually able to do. I live in Utah, and Utah has full practice authority, so that essentially means that nurse practitioners can run their own clinics. They do not have to work underneath a doctor. I'm pretty sure over half of the states in the United States have full practice authority, but there are some states that are a lot more restrictive with what your scope of practice is. So that is another good thing to look into depending on where you live, to see what your scope of practice would be as a nurse practitioner. So where do NPs work? I kind of already touched on this, but NPs can literally work anywhere that hires nurse practitioners. So like I said, where I live, they work everywhere. I don't know any specialty or any place that does not hire nurse practitioners. So you can work in an outpatient setting, you can work in an inpatient setting like a hospital, you can work urgent cares, you can work remotely and do telehealth visits, you can work in mental health facilities, and you can work in schools and universities. So how much do nurse practitioners make, and is it worth going back to school? Nurse practitioners on average make about $130,000 a year, with the higher end of that scale being $150,000 and the lower end of that scale being roughly $100,000. So how much you make is going to vary depending on what specialty you go into, whether your salary or hourly pay, and your experience. One thing that I want to point out is that a lot of people say that they do not want to go back for their nurse practitioner degree because they're already making so much as a nurse that getting the nurse practitioner degree would cut back the amount that they are earning per hour. And that is a valid concern. You know, a lot of nurses do cap out, and yes, we do have caps on how much you can make as a nurse. But one thing that I always try to tell people is that, let's say you are making $50 an hour as a nurse, and you're gonna start as a nurse practitioner making $50 an hour. Yeah, you might not see that big increase, but the difference is that as a nurse practitioner, the cap that you can make is much higher than you can make as a nurse. And of course, there's ways to make more money as a nurse. You can travel and do all that stuff, but just generally speaking, with a regular, you know, bedside job or 9-to-5 job, the cap as a nurse is going to be lower than the cap as a nurse practitioner. And like I've said before, I would also look into your state's average. Maybe in your state there's a higher demand for nurses than there is for nurse practitioners, and it doesn't make sense to go back, but generally speaking, you are going to make more money as a nurse practitioner. So what do you guys think? Do you want to be a nurse practitioner? Have you thought about becoming a nurse practitioner? Are you now open to becoming a nurse practitioner? Personally, I decided to get my nurse practitioner degree because I liked the idea of the higher autonomy, and I like the difference that you can make in a patient's life by giving them a plan of care versus just following through doctor's orders like I do as a nurse. And that is a huge responsibility that I do not and will not take lightly. Advancing my education as a nurse is something that has truly made me fall in love with the nursing profession again, and has made me excited for my future and my future career. Let me know what you guys think. Is it something that sounds good to you? Or is it something that you're not really interested in? Is there anything that I didn't answer that you guys still have questions on? If so, leave me a comment and I will get back to you. If you found this video helpful at all, please comment, like, and subscribe to my channel, and follow me on my journey of becoming a nurse practitioner. I am about to finish my 5th out of 6 semesters, and I could not be more excited. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you in my next video.